So I'll start. Will Perkins. I'm managing director of a company called SE Controls, a Midlands-based specialist in smoke control systems, from design, manufacture, installation, commissioning, and service and maintenance. And our core market is high-rise residential buildings. Hence, and it was through connections with George that George invited me to get involved in this meeting. And my particular interest in this area is actually in active fire control systems, and in particular the data capture throughout the journey of the construction, but importantly post-occupation is about what sort of data we can capture real-time post-occupation to maintain that level of safety and security. So that's me. I'll hand over to Bill Watts.
Hello, am I on? Looks
yep.
like.
Yeah, you're on.
Okay, thank you. Bill Watts from Max Fordham LLP. We're building services consulting engineers. My interest is in trying to understand the procurement process and make it more efficient all the way through, and also provide a good set of information at the end of the project for owners and users to operate. And that's an ambition that we've shared with, discussed with George. And I can see that fire being one of the first things to be mandated as far as building information management is concerned. So I'm happy to come along on that basis. Thanks.
Good, thank you, Bill. Thank you. Gavin Pearson. Gavin, your microphone is muted at the moment.
Yeah, thank you. So I'm Gavin Pearson, Director of Building Safety for the Guinness Partnership. So we're a housing association, a large national housing association. I've been in post with Guinness since April, and part of my remit is to look at, we are using BIM, but we're probably reliant on external partners to tell us what we need, and that's not a healthy place to be. So from a client's perspective, we're really keen to have a better understanding of it and tailor the end output to suit the client a bit better. So I'd like to be involved with this group really to contribute towards that.
Excellent, good, thank you, Gavin. George, actually, George, can I pick up on you right at the very end, please?
Sure.
Special case. Jack Ostrowski.
Hi, everybody. My name is Jack Ostrowski. I'm head of design and technical and quality here at Southern Housing. We're implementing BIM. I'm involved with BIM4Housing associations, and I'm also been speaking with some people with their involvement at BS 8644, and also with setting up a data dictionary for fire safety products with HASCT and the Building Research Establishment.
Excellent. Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you.
Jack White.
Hi, Jack White. I work for Clarion Housing Group. I am leading on the golden thread as part of our building safety case. So, well, fits perfectly within this. Good.
Jis, do you want to introduce yourself, because I know you're doing a lot of work for us in the background?
Yeah, I'm an intern at Active Plan, working under George and Richard. So I'll be helping Richard with the managemental stuff.
Okay, good. Welcome. Thank you. Johnny Furlong.
Hi all. Johnny Furlong, BIM strategy lead at L&Q. So looking after the golden thread, and also doing a piece of work with MHCLG around standardized digital golden thread for building safety cases.
Super. Well, welcome. Luke Hazelwood.
So Luke Hazelwood, I'm from L&Q as well. I'm from the operations side, building services asset information manager. So from my point of view, it's very similar to yours in SE Controls. I'm interested in the post handover and how it's going to be used after handover. Yeah.
Good. Good. And your dog is under control.
Yeah, he's out in the garden now.
Excellent. Very good. Michael Strongren.
Yes, so Michael Strongren, I'm the public affairs manager at the BREAB, fire and risk consultancy company in Sweden, who also issues the BIM4 software suite. And I work with advancing fire safety digitalization. I'm a former national fire safety regulator of Sweden, and I've been involved in quite a few international regulations and standards projects. And I would also like to mention that I'm currently involved in 3 international standardization projects concerning digitalization of fire safety that is related to either BIM or golden thread related information. And we are currently conducting 2 research projects as well within BREAB. One is called the Unbroken Chain of Information, which very much relates to the golden thread of information in the UK, and that's also why we realized quite early after Grenfell that you have a really interesting situation in the UK where fire safety regulations is driven from a different angle. We have the same kind of problems in Sweden and many other countries, and that's why we started that research project. And the other research project is on digitalization of fire safety data for property owners and the associated information delivery requirements. So we're mainly here because we're really interested in the learning more and maybe helping out, fleshing out the golden thread of information, and also asset management of fire safety. And I'd also like to think that we could contribute by linking and exchanging information with these international initiatives.
Excellent. An international dimension too. Thank you, Michael. Welcome on board. Neil Yeomans.
Hi guys. So I'm Neil Yeomans. I'm head of customer safety at Orbit Housing, another housing association to add to the clutch. My main focus is obviously, the Building Safety Act that will be coming out in the next few months, if not a year or so. And we're, touch wood, about to start a case study with the MHCLG on a new build that we're looking at testing the issues between Gateway 2 and 3 on the proposed bill. So that's me.
Good. Welcome. Nick Horton.
Hello, I'm Nick, obviously. Work for Sapphire Balconies. We're the largest balcony company in the UK. Also operate in Canada and Australia and New Zealand. We have been leading the fire conversation in the UK even pre-Grenfell, and we've done a lot of work upwards with quite a number of the different fire brigades, speaking with them and investigating balcony fires in particular. We're also currently investing massive amount of money in digital as part of aligning what we're doing in different countries around the world. And obviously, predominantly our marketplace is the high-rise residential. We've been working for people like the Guinness Partnership and L&Q and so on, and the big boys in the marketplace, as probably most of you are aware of. We also head up the committee on BS 8579, which is the balcony standard, which has just been launched yesterday, in fact. So yeah, that's our kind of involvement. And aside of that, we also have a event brand for educating best practice in the marketplace, so which is called ResiBuild. I know some of you are already aware of that, but that really, we've been arranging pre-COVID, arranging physical events in the Shard and so on, getting the industry together to talk and collaborate, a bit like we're doing now, but virtually. So that's our kind of interest in that, and as part of that, we're currently writing a book on best practice for high-rise construction as well.
Excellent. Thank you, Nick. Thank you. Welcome. Next person on the list is Phil. I haven't got a surname, and I don't think your surname is Guest. It's Phil Guest.
Will that be me, Phil Murphy?
Phil Murphy, right. Hi, Phil.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Phil Murphy. I'm an independent high-rise residential building safety management advisor based in Manchester. I've got a history in fire safety going back 30 years. I learnt my trade as a firefighter at the busiest fire station in Europe, completely surrounded by high-rise blocks in Moss Side in Manchester. I subsequently studied fire safety engineering with the Institution of Fire Engineers and fully qualified as a fire safety officer at the National Centre of Excellence, as it was then, Morton in Marsh. The last 10 years, I've been working commercially with owners and managers and landlords of complex and high-rise buildings of all uses across the UK. Most recently, in the last 3 years, that's been dominated by work with residential buildings, hence that becoming my specialism now. I was recruited to be the lead technical author on the high-rise addendum to the Housing Health and Safety Rating System for the Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government.
Excellent. Great to have you on board, Phil. Great knowledge there we want to tap into. Richard Freer.
Oh, hi. Yeah, well, I'm just a marketing consultant. I'm just here to enable and facilitate. So you'll find I'll just be fading into the background, into the shadows and not saying much.
All right, thanks, Richard. Scott.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Scott Sanderson. I'm a partner at PRP, and we are a large design consultancy, but the core business is architecture and a particular focus on residential. My role in business straddles technical design and BIM, so I'm kind of slap bang in the middle of things around fire and fire safety. And I think my primary interest and connect with this group is, I guess, making real the granular detail that we've all got to tackle to achieve golden thread, demonstrate compliance and get buildings signed off by a regulator sometime in the next 18 months.
Thanks, Scott. Sarah Stevenson-Jones.
Hiya. Sarah Stevenson-Jones, Resident Safety Director for London Borough of Enfield. So I'm here for my own personal reasons as a stockholder, but I also chair the London Council's Housing Directors Fire Safety Group. So I'm here with my kind of London Council's hat on as well to make sure that we disseminate the information across all of the boroughs. I'm also Vice National Chair of the Social Housing Fire Strategy Group, so I have a wider remit across England and Wales in the sector as well, though I don't go quite as far as Scotland. We drew the line somewhere. I know most of the guys from the RP sector on the call as well, so it's good to see we've got good representation from the stock owner side.
Good, thank you, Sarah. Welcome on board. And Stuart Bailey, you are allowed to talk.
Thank you very much. Hi, everyone. So Virtual Viewing, our company is a data visualization company. And actually, we've been banging on about BIM for a good 8-9 years now, and it was Scott that introduced me to the group. Scott and I have been working, together on a project for network housing for the last 4 or 5 years now, all around BIM. And our company's data visualization drive is use BIM to visualize everything from health and safety issues through to the golden thread, through to Southern Housing have one of our apps for sales and marketing. L&Q we're working with on MMC and DFMA, and for me it's all about use BIM as the central hub. It doesn't have to be a full-blown digital twin to be useful, but use the BIM model. So that's what do I want to get out of this, is that all of a sudden BIM has become focal or focused on because of Grenfell, unfortunately, and because of the building safety bill, and so it absolutely aligns with where our corporate trajectory is, and that aligns work that we're doing with Scott at PRP.
Excellent. Thank you, Stuart. Welcome. And Yusuf.
Hello, everyone. My name is Yusuf Mohammed. I'm one of the directors of Plumis. We do a innovative alternative to fire sprinklers. It's a water mist based system. We're currently retrofitting them in a number of sheltered housing schemes across London, and really interested in digitizing information. I mean, this is something that we've done as a company quite heavily when it comes to the layout drawings, whether it is the engineers who actually install or commission, trying to ensure that there's a digital record of everything. It's kind of been fundamental to what we do. BIM is the kind of next step in advancing that.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Thanks for the time. And I'll just hand over to George now, who wants to just give us an update on various elements of BIM4Housing.
Thanks very much, Will. Yeah, so what I wanted to do is just explain to people that are new to this, that haven't been involved in BIM4Housing yet. I took over about 3 months ago, and what I wanted to do was make this so that it's actually an action-led process that covers the whole of the industry. So what we've got within BIM4Housing, we've got a number of different working groups with people that are interested in development, in design, construction, manufacturing, advisory, which includes lawyers, cost managers, project managers, information managers, and obviously the operations as well. So the principle here is that we've got all of these different stakeholders who can perhaps look at what are the problems that we're having in the industry and how can better information help. So my I've been involved in BIM for crikey 30 odd years, but the common misconception is BIM is about 3D modeling, whereas actually it's about the information. And an important element of that is being able to view things in 3D, but the critical thing is the information itself. So just to give you an example, this is something that we were doing reviews of the information that is actually issued by clients to supply chains to enable them to ensure that they get the asset information that's required. And this is a fairly typical example from one large London borough where they've issued this, which from a contractual point of view probably would tick, tick the requirements, but actually it's extremely difficult to read and understand. And importantly, when they're asking for fire information, they've just got a column called fire, which seems to me to be far too broad to actually say what type of fire information do you need about internal doors and things like that. Here's another one, which is again fairly typical, and in this one it's slightly better in that they're not just saying we want the fire information, they're asking for fire rating. But fire rating, when I then started to explore it, it's quite an ambiguous term. So in the case of IFC, which is the Building Smart Data Dictionary, this is the, if you like, the underlying data dictionary for BIM. You'll see here that when I've searched for fire rating, it's come up with 18 different references to fire rating. And there's 4 which are just called fire rating. So which one do you pick? So when you actually go and look at that, this is a fire rating that relates to a door. And it also talks about, according to the National Fire Code, which at the moment, as I understand it, we don't have a National Fire Code in the UK. This is IFC 4, which is the most up-to-date version of IFC. And here we've got different values here. We've got fire rating, fire resistance rating, and surface spread of flame. Now, are all of those important? Yes, I imagine so. But what's the difference between fire rating and fire resistance rating? And to some extent, that's been my motivation for pulling together you experts to help me understand this. Here I've got something that relates to a door. So this is a standard data set for a door in IFC. And again, we've got here thermal transmittance, which I understand is also an important measure. And here we've got MBS, which is the specification tool. And in this case, in MBS, they don't use the term fire rating at all. They use fire integrity or fire insulation. And when I've discussed this with a number of designers, I'm told that they're being encouraged not to put in there 30 minutes, to simply refer to BS EN 1634-1, and then let the competent person that is reading this pick out what that actually means and interprets, which I think as an FM manager, you would find difficult to operate. So there's a number of things that are underway here. We've got something that Jack mentioned earlier, which is the Housing Data Standards Group, which is being funded by the Housing Association Charitable Trust, or HACT. And we're helping with that with BRE. And what we're doing is using BIM4Housing and the working groups to really take the information that's coming out of these types of groups and review it, peer group review it. And a good example of that is what I issued the other week. So this is something that's coming out of this is a standard data set. There's 250 standard asset types that the housing associations have identified. And in there, we had fire rating. That was the only value that was in there. So what I did, I thought, well, if, for example, this is the point about the work streams. Now we're in a work stream now rather than a working group. So just to explain the difference, the working groups are there to define what the particular key things are that operations people need in terms of better information. And some of that might come from better design information or better construction information. And so therefore, what we're doing is defining particular topics which can then be dealt with by work streams. So the work streams are now looking at how do we standardize AIRs. That, to a great extent, is already being done by BIM4Housing Association. So we can review that as a work stream and then come back with comments. And then once that's then agreed, that then is issued. We've got another one that I'm going to touch on a bit later called change management. So this is the issue of that's in Hackett of how we're moving from a designed object into what actually gets installed. At what point does that, when it changes, how is that recorded? And how can we ensure that that's a robust mechanism to do so? And also generally the O&M and the handover process. So we've got work streams that we're setting up for each of those activities. We've got the same with MMC. That's a work stream that has been going now for about 3 or 4 weeks. And it's really starting to come up with some fantastic outputs. And then in terms of fire safety, the things that you're looking generically at improving fire safety, one thing that I would like to table that we should be having a particular focus on is looking at fire stopping. How can we improve fire stopping? And more generally, how can we contribute towards the golden thread? Those are the 2 topics that Will and Scott have identified that we want to talk about later. But the point about this is that if we've got then this group, which is made up, and this is the important thing, it's made up of people from each of the work streams, and therefore we've got a really strong representation from all those different stakeholder groups. So when I then took the information from the data standards work group, I passed it out, and a number of people came back. One of Scott's colleagues in PRP, who's an expert in fire safety, he kindly contributed to this, and we had and Will did, and a number of other people did. So we've got a number of additional attributes that are considered to be important. Then Michael from BREAB also has contributed another couple of attributes here called fire safety and construction products. So what I'm hoping is that we can very quickly, maybe even today, look at that and say, well, yes, that's the feedback that we want to give back to the Housing Data Standards Group, and we've got an output. So all of a sudden we've achieved something. We've achieved something that is tangible based on the experience of all the different people in this community, which is fantastic. We've got a great turnout today. And we'll then start to move beyond fire safety. It might be that we look at sustainability or recycling or simulation, or one of the obvious topics at the moment that I think is going to become very dominant is infection control. So in summary, the working groups are there to, if you like, manage the strategy, what topics need to be covered, and then the work streams are there to look at this as a coherent cross-group implementation, so that we can actually come out with some simple answers, if that's possible. Or if it's a more complex solution that's needed, that can then get fed back up into a bigger project that we can perhaps get some funding for. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, George. To take this forward, I think the first thing that I'd like to say is, and actually on behalf of Scott and myself, is appreciate everybody in the room has got 101 other things to do. And so one of the discussions we had was really to focus on getting agreement on what an output might be quite quickly, because what we're all aware of is we don't want to waste anybody's time. So we want to be very focused on what that output can be, and bringing in the points that George has made there. For me, what was also encouraging was the thank you all for the time and introducing yourselves. Clearly, the common thread that we all want to contribute to is pretty clear. We're getting that straight away, so I don't think there. The initial proposal that Scott and myself, and Scott, please feel free to chip in at any stage. The initial proposal was that we felt one of the most expedient ways of getting an output was potentially some kind of roundtable discussion. But in particular, taking the suggestion was a passive and an active fire safety product, and following that product's journey through the construction process, but importantly throughout the life of the building. And so I guess the first question I put to everybody is, are you happy that that is a sensible way to approach this, and might give you the kind of outputs that you may be looking for?
I can see Sarah has her hand up. Sarah?
Please. Yep.
Sorry, I couldn't get off mute then for some reason. Could I suggest that we picked two?
Pick two. Sorry, Sarah, I didn't catch that.
Sorry, there's a problem with my button. If we could pick two, an active one and a passive one, because I think those types of elements can be substantially different in the type of information you're looking to collect. Mm-hmm. So I think if you just picked one static passive element, you might not see it to full fruition if you don't pick an active element which you're capturing different data for.
Good. Yeah.
Anyone else?
There we go.
Okay. So does anybody object to the suggestion? Stuart?
Yeah, no, it's not an objection. I guess it's trying to pick something. Could we be looking at where we might be able to get the commercial aspect of the discussion that we're going to be doing as well? So scouring the horizon for the upcoming Innovate UK funding streams, and maybe picking something to research and to collate our case study around, that then could maybe be used as part of a consortium bid into an RUK fund. So, sorry, but yeah, sort of, I think with Scott that teaches me often about it should result in a fee. I know it shouldn't always, but if we can do this work and then find an outlet where we do get paid for the work we're doing, obviously on an RUK it would be for the benefit of the wider, the greater good in any case, then could we look at that, or is that too far downstream?
I think that would be an outcome from the exercise of identifying what the problem is. That would be my suggestion. I would also say that I think this forum, because we've got so much experience on it, this ought to also be, in my view, a forum whereby, if, for example, Phil has got an idea as to how he could make things safer, that it could feed back through, design, construction, operations, whatever. Then I think this ought to be a forum as well where people can make simple suggestions of things that they already know the answer to, but they're struggling to actually get them adopted by people. This is an ideal forum for us to be able to table those sorts of things.
Johnny.
Hi, thanks. I was just wondering, is there going to be like an actual, or maybe there is and I've missed it, a terms of reference for this group, so that essentially so that we stay on track? Because obviously I think lots of us are in these groups and everyone's doing loads of good work, but I think because there's so many of these groups doing stuff, we need to be, as you said, focus and make sure that we get the right delivery out of it, or the right output.
Scott?
Well, yeah, I just want to pick up on that. I mean, Johnny, I'm of a similar mind, that my instinct on this, and I'd be interested to hear others' views, is that the value opportunity is that we are all here together. I don't think many of us are looking for opportunities to generate additional layers of work outside of, focused discussions. And again, in my mind, the value opportunities, we've got all these incredible people here with the experience, and how can we set a structure where we kind of catch it whilst we're together, through some focused discussions, capture that experience, and that in many ways is our deliverable and our task. And that was the suggestion of a kind of round table discussion, if that's possible currently, was maybe people would prefer, rather than committing to a series of 1-hour meetings, we make a slightly more substantial commitment, perhaps to a 2 or 3 hour structured, facilitated session that has a deliverable, and it's more focused in that way. And I'd be interested to take people's views on that in terms of their commitment and how we think we might operate together to produce.
Yeah, so I suppose I don't mind that that all the work gets done in the round table or in the working group. I completely get that. I just think I suppose my concern with there needs to be some kind of structure on the round table, or on there just needs to be a structure that, like, if we give up 3 hours, if for instance 3 people from L&Q are giving up 3 hours of their day, so that's a work day gone, that coming into it, like, my boss is going to be asking, what is it that you're trying to get out of it at the end? And that's simply, like, I'm supportive of the concept. It's just how being able to show somebody this is what just that's why, whether it's a paragraph or whatever, just written down saying this is what we're trying to fix, or this is the problem that we're addressing.
Yeah, Johnny, just I appreciate some insight into some of your recent experience.
Yeah.
I'm in particular obviously looking at sort of safety case review and really drilling the detail. What do you think of the model that we've suggested, where we kind of follow a product through effectively the kind of the life cycle of a project?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm all for getting into the detail. I think like anything that will, because I think, even as you said, if you follow even one single thing along, which it shows you where the golden thread doesn't work, where things break, how sorry, I'll turn on my camera if I'm talking a lot. It will. Yeah, it will show where things don't work. It'll show where we need to focus on. I do agree with that, because there is groups that other parts of the other BIM4Housing and BIM4Housing Association are doing really good work at high level as well. But I do think, we, as somebody said, drilling into the detail does count. And if that is even the output, we are trying to find where things don't work, or where the missing gaps are, that's absolutely fine. But yeah, I suppose it's just we're getting more in our organization having to governance and being able to come back and report what are different groups doing, and that's really it. So it's maybe more an issue for me and L&Q than it is for other people. So, but the approach I agree with.
Yeah, but thanks for that, Johnny. I mean, this is the point that comes across loud and clear. Is we can't afford to waste each other's time because of all the other demands. So yeah, if we're all agreed on that approach, then we don't necessarily. I don't believe we need to specify the output per se yet. I think we've got to be confident enough, there's enough knowledge in the group that we're going to spit out lots of really valuable information, and then guess it's kind of down to myself and Scott and whoever to take that information and put it into a meaningful output. But I think it's possibly too early to even try and define that at the moment. I'm conscious I've got a couple of hands up. Jack.
Yeah, hi everybody. First and foremost, I'd like to second Johnny's proposal that we have some terms of reference, and that should acknowledge the other activities that are related to this. So what we do here complements, doesn't contradict, or if there is a valid contradiction, we need to have a discussion point, then by all means, there shouldn't be a restriction just as, one of the other working groups has had a alternative finding. But what we don't want is duplicate effort. And, I can't afford from my time or my staff's time to be sending delegates here or there or anywhere else that is going to be duplicated. I do think that the work that's been suggested of following a product or two or three or four through the life cycle would be valuable. I think that, it's important for us, though. I guess I kind of disagree a little bit about, okay, we don't know what we should exactly be doing now, that it's a little bit too early. I think we can define, okay, that's a goal that we're going to trace the, REBA 1 design concept of a couple of products. I think we could be, if we're going to establish that methodology and having all that, I guess an intellectual framework to chase these things through the stages, we can afford to do more than just two. I think we could do maybe 3 of 3, or maybe even, 6 passive and then 2 or 3 active measures, because the active measures are going to be obviously a lot more complicated. But once we have that methodology established, then boom, that's something for us to work on. I would be happy to join that endeavor myself and try to get other people from my organization and then other people involved. I think the thing about I understand that there's commercial interests on board here, and that's important that it's part of the forum. But I'm a client. I that to me has, I think, directly no interest. For me, I'm not going to try to get fees out of this, but I would like to see. I think, I wouldn't say it's out of the question, but I would be a bit reluctant to say that's part of what we should be doing. But on the other hand, it might be valuable for us to pursue funding. Because this is useful work, and what a collection of expertise has been assembled here. This is really, really good. There's a lot of experience here, and the commercial interests, if they weren't here, it wouldn't be as good. So I'll hand the microphone over to somebody else now.
Okay, thanks, Jack. Nick.
I agree with the concept. I like the fact that we're talking about steering it between certain parameters, and it's good. The round table concept works well. From our experience in the event world, both digitally and also physically, we've done big events, we've done panel discussions, we've done smaller sessions. If we would spend 3 hours with a lot of people on this call like we've got now, I can imagine that we'd end up with a small handful of people doing the majority of the talking, and a lot of other people not so involved. I'd personally recommend that it might be better to do it as like breakout groups using something like a Zoom or something like that, whereby we have a chat as a team to start off with, split out into different groups and take one subject each, and then come back together to actually compare what the discussion's been and summarising that. Because it's much more effective use of all our time. So we're spending 1 hour addressing 3 subjects and getting hopefully the same end result and all the feedback as a team. But that's just a more an way of doing it, perhaps.
Thanks, Nick. Yes, I think that's a good idea, because just straight away with this many people, it's quite unwieldy to try and manage it on in this format. So thank you, George.
Yeah, I just absolutely agree with the process. I think we should, though, is make sure that at the end of that 2-hour or 3-hour session, we're actually delivering something. Yeah. So what we don't want to do is go into it and then come out with more questions than we went in with. You know, there is a tendency that can happen. So.
Yes, it's a huge subject, and one of the biggest challenges is trying to keep on track, and like you say, get some meaningful output. Not necessarily answers. It might, but it might be key areas that need further research.
Could I just ask? I attended one of Sarah's meetings earlier in the week, or last week, and they have task and finish groups. And I quite like the sound of that. I didn't really understand the detail of it, but it sounds quite a good thing for us to be able to. So this work stream, we could break it into various, maybe out of the round tables, if there aren't immediate answers that we could actually come up with, which, you know, quite frankly, I think there probably will be. There'll be some things in there that you could say, well, listen, if you do this a bit more simply, I was talking about fire stopping earlier. There's probably a very simple way that we could ensure that fire stopping locations of items are actually recorded properly. Bang. Yeah. Somebody was asking me earlier today about how you do labeling. You know, how do you barcode and how do you structure that? I can explain to them how I think that ought to be done. We can then review that in this expert group, and then that becomes an output. So there's some simple things like that, but there's more complex ones. I just wondered if, Sarah, you could tell us about the task and finish groups.
Yeah, I mean, it's as you described in the packet, George. So what we tend to do is agree as a group what the overall workflow needs to be. Officers then, obviously, based on skill set or experience, say, well, I know sufficient about this area to have a good level of input. We put names against it, give it a time scale, and send them off to do the piece of work, and then bring it back to the centre. Once it's at draft stage for kind of almost challenge, a nice challenge, but challenge, and then they go off and finalise based on feedback.
Cool.
Okay. Anybody else want to throw in a comment? And Jack, no.
Yeah, won't be long. Don't want to be hugging the microphone, but one of the approaches that we use in BIM4Housing associations is, you know, very similar to what Nick had suggested, is that there's working groups that are established, they have tasks, and we manage that in Microsoft Teams with breakout teams, use the Microsoft Teams filing function. The funding, you know, there was fairly modest amount that was collected from the participating housing associations, hired a project manager. That project manager is helping coordinate activities, put together a Gantt chart, you know, put those timelines together, and then chases people when they're late. So that's been helpful towards getting the outcomes that we want. But, you know, again, sorry to go back, the terms of reference was, you know, I think Johnny said, you know, something really simple. You know, we got potentially a complex endeavor here. So it might be more than just a paragraph. You know, we wound up with about 3 or 4 pages, but, you know, it depends on what the scope and the ambition is. So
I've
be done.
Well, a question and an observation. Well, an observation then a question. I think from what I see is that there's kind of tension between communicating this issue at a sort of simple strategic level outward. So the challenge that faces the housing sector, is it recognised and are, you know, broadly across our sector, and are enough people, enough clients, consultants, project teams beginning to address the issue. So I think there's a piece in question in my mind about whether this is something that that the output is kind of strategic and sort of high level versus is actually the real challenge to get in and tackle the granular detail. And it seems to me that there's kind of opportunities in both areas with the expertise we've got here, that there's a network you can spread the message, which is important to sort of to help communicate what's coming, but also to really try and get down to some of the nitty gritty. But I find that I think there's a bit of a tension between the two objectives in terms of how you manage the process and the level of detail you try to get to. And I'm kind of curious whether what people's lean is it about that granular detail or is it about strategic messaging on this subject?
Yeah, could I just say something on that, Scott? Because we've got to look at this in the context of what everybody else is doing in terms of BIM4Housing. Yeah. So we've got the working groups that are established, and they're very active. And we've got, for example, in the operations group, they met last week, and there was 10 of them in the working group. So what they're doing, they're working quite hard to go through the questions that the industry has been asking to try and come up with some solutions to those questions, right? Now, that I would see as being where the strategic bit comes from. The work streams are there to basically be representative. So, in other words, each work stream, in theory, is electing a couple of people to join. Sorry, each working group is electing a couple of people that are interested in fire, for example, to actually work with other people that are experts in fire to actually come up with some solutions which then represent the interests of all those different parties. Yeah. Now, if we do that effectively, we can also then relate that to other activities which are also asking for change, but we can avoid them conflicting with each other. So, for example, the thing I mentioned about change management, that's something that is very relevant to fire safety. So looking at your process of following something through a process, let's say, a fire door, for example, actually, when it starts off as being just a boundary between two spaces, and then when it becomes a fire door, and then what's the impact of that from a design perspective? What's the impact from a manufacturing perspective? Those are the sorts of things that are representative. So I think the work streams, we should really keep the work streams as being the people that are doing the detail. If we need to feed it back up, then I think that should come through the working groups themselves.
Fair enough.
So that's quite nice, because what you're saying, I think you're supporting that we do actually focus on the granular detail of this process and use that as the starting point to kick out the questions or potential solutions.
I think so.
Okay. Would it be possible? I'm just thinking, the various stakeholders, we've got a nice spread of stakeholders in the group. Would it be possible for you all to put some kind of questions together or explain what it is you're looking to get out of this, or the problems that you're facing or your organization is facing, and then I can myself and Scott, we can collate all of these questions, and potentially that will help us to work out a terms of reference and the potential methodology. I like the idea of potentially using the REBA 1 process. We've identified passive and active products. We need to do both. We've potentially got a way of working which is following the REBA process. But what would really be helpful if you could send issues through and potential questions that need answering, and then I can collate those, and that's going to help us put effectively a series of questions that we can use at the roundtable forum. Would that be possible?
I think that's a good idea. Can I just add to it, please? What? I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm being pulled into a Zoom meeting. Sorry. Yeah. What I would add to that is, as well as the problem and potential solutions, or rather, I think it would be good to know what the problem is and a solution that you've actually found to it that you can share with the rest of the group. Yeah. Because in many cases, we know what the solutions are, but they may not be shared. Yeah. And when, for example, somebody's identified, let's say Nick, for example, has identified a way that a particular problem that he knows of it could be solved, it might be that it comes in from or so it might affect the way let's say Johnny would set up his procurement. So I agree with you. Just add that separate thing to it.
Okay. So I'm conscious that we're getting towards the end of our hour. So how about myself and Scott will put together a brief summary of the discussions here today, which will put some specific requests for information, be it questions, specific areas of interest like fire stopping and location of fire stopping, George. Request for that information to be submitted. Once we've got that, we'll create a terms of reference and a proposed methodology. Probably worth us meeting together for half an hour to narrow it down so we're all clear, and then set a date for a period of, let's say, 3 hours, but having several roundtable discussions. Nick's suggestion of trying to do it all in one is clear. It's not going to be the easiest, so we'd split it into several roundtable sessions. Does that sound okay, Bill?
Yes, it sounds fine. I'm just following up on what George was saying about and things. A lot of this is about manufacturing and having stuff which is already available from manufacturers, like the doors, being able to read what a door is with an RFID or something like that, and the fire stopping, that sort of automation of that process. Other people who should be here who aren't, who we could go off and invite.
That's a fabulous point, Bill. We had asked Jonathan Evans from Ashen Lacey, who's specialist external cladding. He is part of the team, but he's not with us today. But I think, George, on any of the other working groups, are there any fire door manufacturers?
No, there aren't. But what would, I think, be really useful from this group is if you could give us a list of the people that you think we ought to connect with. They don't necessarily need to come into the group, but we could include them in some of the sub activities.
Yeah, we've got enough contacts. We'll find you a couple.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you're talking about doing round tables and breakouts for 3 hours, that's a whole different ballgame from getting somebody to commit to meetings every week. So if you need someone, we'll find them.
Okay. Yeah. So really, manufacturers of passive fire products would be fabulous.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sarah said that she could find them, but we'll obviously.
Yeah, I can think of a few. We can feed in names for sure.
Yeah, I'll speak to Niall at the Association of Passive Fire Protection as well and get a couple of members and details from him.
Great, thank you, Sarah.
I mean, I think I know there are a lot of people who know what the problems are here, and there are a lot of people who are trying to design them out. But the people who are actually delivering them are, we're actually supplying the thing, the widget that isn't. I'm thinking about fire stopping. You think, you will, as a guy with some cement, and he needs to be able to put a label there to say it's done or something like that. So there's a bit of technology, or have you got a cushion in there? you know, how do you know that's in there without actually looking at it? And those are sorts of things that, you know, the designer side of us, we love to come up with some solutions, but we need somebody to actually do it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So would it be useful to get some third-party accredited fire stopping installers?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. And then I can't remember. I'm just looking through my notes for the name of the app, but this is something that Max Fordham probably is using, I guess, is that there's an app that if you make a hole in a compartment, that's, you know, in a compartment that Scott has drawn, that it will find out and label it. There is an app for building services that can be, and that would be useful for us to get into this particular discussion, so we all know what it is and see how good it is.
Yeah.
So I'll find out what that is if I can find it in my notes someday. There's only a few pages to go through.
Yeah, I also got an email the other day from one of our suppliers saying that they've started doing some kind of digital modelling now around their installations as well. So I'll try and dig that over and circulate it. And
Neil Yeomans, you guys are doing the Pathfinder from 2 to 3. Can you tell us about that?
We're just, it's very in the early stages at the moment. We've just been having a conversation with the MHCLG about using a site down in London to have a look at as a case study on how the draft bill is currently drafted to see if it actually works.
Okay.
We've literally only just started those conversations at the moment, but they're moving on quite quickly, and I'm hoping probably in the next fortnight we'll get the thumbs up. But I don't know yet. It will depend upon whether the building that we're building is suitable for the MHCLG's needs, and it will also depend on how much money it's going to cost us, because the amount of work that they're looking at asking us to do is a little bit unknown at the moment. So we've literally just received the proposal for the MHCLG Monday, so it's very much in its fledgling at the minute.
All right.
But I'm happy to keep this group up. Yeah, well, it's something that we're eager to do. It's just interesting to see where the labour costs are going to be, because if it's on our side, I can control that in terms of, you know, I can give some of my team up to do it and whatnot. If it's on the development side, then, you know, it throws out all the feasibility studies and all the lovely stuff that we have to go through. So there's still a couple of unknowns, but I'll fix that in the next couple of weeks.
All right.
Good. Well, conscious we're at the end of the hour, so thank you all for your time. What I'll do, I'll get my heads together with Scott. We'll put together a round robin email which summarises the discussions and the proposed actions, next steps, and I think it's probably sensible we'll also include the next tentative meeting date. Okay. In the meantime, if anybody's got any ideas or comments, then please feel free to feed them through to me. All right.
Yeah, could I just ask? I'd like to be able to go back to the Housing Data Standards group. If I share with you the most up-to-date version of the spreadsheet that I showed you earlier, all we're really looking for is to see if this group can identify any other attributes that we ought to have against the asset types that are being defined. I mean, we've got quite a few there, but that would be helpful. And Michael, I'd quite like a couple of, I mean, is it worth just bringing it up for a moment to ask? We could probably knock it on the head.
George, I don't want to be rude, but I'm conscious everybody gave an hour of their time and we've used the hour.
The invitation was actually for until 4:30.
Oh, was it?
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah, in the calendar. But you know, we can stop or.
I'd be happy to stay and discuss if you're available.
Yeah, please. Yeah.
Okay. Well, how about if anybody needs to move on to other meetings, please carry on. If anybody wants to hang around and discuss with George, then feel free to.
Yeah, I'm only talking about 2 or 3 minutes.
Okay.
So
go for it.
I'd just like to be able to go back and so this is the first pass, and then we added these. So
George, I think you might want to check your display, because I just see your grinning countenance.
No,
okay.
I was all right.
Yeah, it wasn't bad.
Is that better?
No, I think you were much better looking than that particular chart.
It works fine for me.
Well,
yeah, it's working, George.
I see the
You have to zoom in a little bit. Then my eyesight's not that good.
Yeah. I know
You should be able to hold control and scroll on your own screen. Everyone should be able to zoom in and out.
That make it as big as I can. All right. So, oops, sorry. Yeah, so Michael, we've got here, sorry, that's obscuring it now. Apologies. Michael, could you just explain to us what you mean by fire safety?
Yes, so we sort of attacked this by looking at this list of assets, and we concluded that some of them does not really seem to be relevant or relevant for fire safety. They wouldn't have a fire safety.
I see what you mean.
Yeah, and the second one would be: is it a construction product or not? Because that would affect what regulations are relevant for it. For example, maybe something that you have in your building. Let's see if we have one example here. Yeah, a bathtub, for example. That wouldn't be a part of the building itself. So these fire ratings or integrity and so on wouldn't be relevant as a construction product. Then of course you could have objects in your building which could obstruct an evacuation path and so on, but that would be a different kind of thing. So I don't know.
Cool.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Does anybody else? So fire rating and fire integrity. Sorry, fire integrity and fire insulation were ones that I picked up from MBS Chorus, and reaction to fire. I think that was added by Jonathan Evans. So are there any other measures? I guess that's the question really. Are there any other measures that we want to feed back to BIM4Housing associations that we want to include in the AIR?
Well, I think that reaction to fire should be broken down according to BS 13501. So you have the smoke production, the droplet production, and I think there's another dimension. I think it's the flame. I can't remember offhand, but
yeah,
that's an important one because that's referenced in the current and will be in the new regulations.
Is that easy for you to just jot down what those are, please, Jack, and then we can feed that back in?
Yeah.
Anybody else? Is Phil still on the call?
I think it would be good to define the different categories, because I think it's a bit confusing with fire rating, integrity, and insulation. They may be different interpretation of those. So I could give some suggestions on what I think they mean, and then we could have a discussion perhaps.
That'd be great. That'd be really helpful, Michael.
And I will of course use the British classifications of products, which is the same as the European.
Yeah, the BSEN is a universal, so it's across boundaries. It is BSEN 13501. So fire resistance would be load bearing capacity, for example. But I think this is more of a workshop, to be honest.
Okay.
I think when we're considering creating this data and this information, we have to think of it from cradle to grave. the core places from where this information will stem really are quite rightly British standards. Absolutely, that's got to be part of the package, but also the relevance of what that item is called or what it's referred to within approved document B is where that information is going to stem from. And if we adopt that strategy, I think everybody from the architect that sits down to draw a skeleton drawing of what the framework of a building is going to look like will know where his starting point is in that regard, whether that be the level of resistance or the standard to which a wall has to reach, right through. You've got to think 50 years down the line, somebody's going to be sat at a desk in front of a computer screen, and if they get that same piece of information and they know what it means, then it's going to be correct. It's very much about what that item has to do, where that stems from, and every person on that journey understanding exactly what it is, what it needs to do, and the standards according to when it was designed. Now, remember the issues that we're having now are looking at how we understand accurately what standard a particular article met when it was built, because that's the one that's most relevant now as we're going back to try and replicate it to at least the same standard. So understanding from the architect, if that flows, this is what a golden thread is in my eyes. It's that flow of a piece of information that remains consistent, and all the pieces of information that are in it explain to us exactly what it does and what we need to find to do it again, if that makes any sense. That's where the golden thread is going to come in useful, because we're going to look at something that was specified by an architect and be able to find that item again in its most basic usage on a more complex level. Each of us might want to understand more about any product. And when we look at that, we're going to say, that's what the architect intended. That's where it comes from within the building regulations. This is the standard, and within that standard, the rating. So whilst I do feel as though we might be reinventing the wheel a little bit with the spreadsheet. We've got a hell of a range of people here. Can anybody go away and get some asset registers, and let's see how it's being done already?
Oh yeah, we've that's exactly where this has come from.
Yeah,
we've had housing associations and the FM managers, and everybody's been contributing, and quite frankly, the asset information doesn't carry that type of information. And the other thing I would say, Phil, I'm sorry, Neil, I know to say something, but just to answer that question, the other point is that although it's clearly important to be able to reference what the original specification is and also the standards, etc., the person that's going to be replacing that is probably a procurement chap in an FM company. Yeah, in 8 years' time, and he's just going to buy what he's told to buy. And if you don't have it there explicitly that needs to be a 60-minute fire door, yeah, clearly it may no longer need to be a 60-minute fire door. It may need to be something better because of what's happening on either side of that. There probably should be a fire risk assessment before that fire door is replaced. But in reality, we have to try and give people explicit information where necessary, I think.
And that's according to design intention. That's my point. That's my point, really. It's the design intention that we need to understand. And if that information travels with that article,
agreed,
then it will remain consistent.
Agreed. Neil?
Two comments. One very specific, one that might open up to a slightly wider piece of work, and one a little bit more obtuse. The first one is, can we? I don't think I've had this list because there's some elements on there that it might be worth having a chat about. So, for example, asbestos on there is saying that it's not a fire safety element, but going back to Phil's point, asbestos was very much it was an intention to limit fire spread. It was very good at that. Not very good at certain other, allowing people to breathe and whatnot, but it was really good at stopping fire. So that was the original design intent. And I wonder whether it'd be worth just going through that list to see if we all agree on not just what columns are there, but also what's in the columns, what has been agreed. So there's one element. The second one is just a note that the building safety, the draft bill, open the bill beyond fire safety into structural, and I think certainly as a column we need structural, a structural column on there. So those are my two comments.
Yeah, that was only there can be as many attributes as we like against these different elements. I just picked out fire as one that we needed that this group could contribute to. Yeah, so I think, Jack, it would be fine to let Neil have that the draft list.
Absolutely, yeah, that's public.
Cool.
So one really silly one, as I noticed, you've got a spelling error in AOV override. Silly.
There's quite a few actually. It's not my document.
but the thing that stood out to me is you have that list seems to have locations or spaces in a building and equipment. And is it intentionally in the same item? Because essentially a location, a bicycle store isn't an asset in itself. It's a space in the building that would contain a fire door or something like that, or fire stopping. Is that intentionally mixing those up on the same list?
So just to clarify what this list is, it is an agreed list between, I think, 13 housing associations on things that are from their asset management systems that have maintenance requirements. So it might be where they have described a space where it should be a component. So there's some rationalization that still needs to occur with that list, because yes, that's incorrect, that we should be focusing on components. But I think, for the purposes of this working group that's forming up, the focus is fire safety components. And what I think the gap in all of the different working groups that have been mentioned, within BIM4Housing and BIM4Housing associations and some of the other things, is the attributes assigned to these particular items, which aren't universally agreed. So, what I've shared just with George, and because I'm not able to, because my laptop's not working, I would have put it in the chat. But maybe, George, you could cut and paste that in. Is sure. The BRE has a list of nominative and normative references for fire safety testing and the reactions of fire. And I think that, if we, for example, pick a couple of components and define how they react to fire, like a fire door, what its resistance is, structural integrity, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I think that's going to help us define the golden thread.
Yeah, I don't have that, Jack, I don't think.
It should be with you. It doesn't need to be here now, I don't think, because this isn't, the details.
No, sure.
And one other thing is what Phil said about the what the actual design or the purpose of something that was built was, following it through. That is an issue we have in operations. Is the issue we have is you have our fire risk assessors will go out to a building and go, oh no, this doesn't conform, and then we go back to them and go, well, actually it conforms to what it's meant to for when it was built, but we don't have proof of that. That is a big thing. So they quite often go around and say, this should be a firefighting lift. And we say, well, you can't make it a firefighting lift because it's not just the lift. You have to compartmentalize the whole area around the lift. and there isn't the space to do that without stripping out the whole building.
Yeah, so I think that's why I'm promoting the idea that we reference the British standards, because those are the list that I sent across to George, and I think the list that we should be working off of in principle is what's listed in the building regulations. So, going back to 13501, that's listed in the building regulations. So the things that, your fire risk assessors should be assessing risk against the relevant standards.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's the principle behind what I'm proposing.
Yeah.
What I would propose, and but that's for everybody to agree.
Going through that list, going through that list there, and I do think we need to figure out what they mean by fire safety, fire integrity, when you just put yes against everything. When you're saying fire integrity of an AOV switch, fire integrity of a buggy store.
Yeah, sorry, Lee. What this is, just to explain the context, what we're basically doing is producing a standard asset information requirement.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what we're doing is saying, what attributes do we want an answer against? Yeah.
Okay.
So when that then gets issued, then the person that's actually receiving it, who could be a manufacturer or a trade contractor, they then need to provide those 3 or 4 bits of information about a fire door.
Okay.
Another example, which I think, George, I've circulated this to you before, is I think it's easier to get my head around it, at least, is BS 5839. And I'm sure a lot of people on the call know that that's the fire detection standard. And within that, you have enough particular parameters that are defined by that standard. So you will have LD1, LD2, LD3. Then you will have, A, B, C, D, E, F. And everybody who, fire risk assessor or architect or building control or fire risk assessor, they know what all of those mean. And they'll know, for example, that certain situations in LD2 is not good enough, extra care. I think, Phil, you'd recognize that right away. So that's the sort of parameters that we're looking to define in an asset information requirement, so we can instruct a supply chain to say, you put in some smoke detection in my flat, tell me, not just in a PDF, but in data. So exactly, I can put that into an asset management system. So the terms of reference, that is what is missing amongst a lot of things that are missing, but that's what's missing from everybody's work that's going on. The granular detail of what are the attributes to, smoke detection, got that. Lift and shift from 5839. Smoke detect, automatic opening vents, that's another challenge, because I don't understand that as well. So somebody else on the call certainly will. But as far as bicycle racks and whatever else is on that list, if it doesn't have to do with fire, just let's ignore that. We should come up with a rationalized list. And structure is important, but there's a fire group. So, it's not the building safety case group, it's the fire group. We've got some fire experts here. Let's leverage that expertise and plug that gap.
Yeah, we're going to have another group looking at safety. So we've got another group specifically focused at that. Scott.
Thanks, George. I think actually the comment I was going to make has been broadly picked up, but I think in my experience, and we're trying to tackle this issue within our own design workflows, is you'll struggle to agree single terms around fire performance classification because they vary across different systems and components. So I think there's going to have to be a granularity to this, and I think I'm agreeing broadly with Jack that if you even take, for example, we had an exchange recently with a client who wanted us to validate that the performance of all materials on the external envelope of a building. So that's mixing the facade and the roof, which is 2 different parts of 13501. So you've got to you've got to break it down to a granular level, and at a system and component level, bolt in the relevant requirement, which I think is then going right back up to what is the regulatory requirement, start with the building regs, and then where does that take you to the related British standards in the main.
Yeah, from product to assembly to system is one dimension of the matrix that needs to be put together.
Yeah.
Agreed.
But I think we could map that, you know, the people here to do it. It's going to make the spreadsheet a bit more complicated, but that's the granular detail we're on the hunt for, isn't it?
It doesn't matter. And if I could just revert back to what I said at the beginning, that first one that I gave was the City of London's current AIR. And the only requirement that they're giving there for the supply chain is that they want fire information. Yeah. Now, if we're going to use anything to automatically test to see if the attributes that Jack's just mentioned there are consistent, because we can't have a situation where people have got to physically read specifications and data sheets to see if information is there or not, because that's dangerous. We need to know what those key those key attributes are, in my view, and therefore we need to be able to procure them. And if there's 10 attributes or a dozen attributes, it doesn't really matter as long as we can actually define what those are.
Yeah, interesting.
There's also context, and we're working as part of this group. We're actually working with the BRE to make it so that you can have the context in which something's used will then suggest a different attribute. Yeah, but at the moment we don't have that level of flexibility. All we're doing at the moment is trying to create a simple list.
Yeah.
I think I'm the one now that needs to close this down because sorry, or Will, sorry, let me pass back over to you. Sorry.
I think Johnny's got his hand up and two others as well.
Sorry.
Yeah, Johnny.
Yeah, I was just going to say, obviously, quickly, what we sort of tried to do here was the two things. One, a list, the George list that he showed us, which is trying to capture common things across everything. But then at the start of here, we spoke about taking something, getting really into the granular detail and figuring it out. And I do think that they often conflict with each other, because when you're trying to do something across every product, you end up with this 2 or 3, 4, 5, 10 list, which then you end up, everyone goes, well, it doesn't work for this one, it doesn't work for this one. This is where you end up with somebody just saying, tell me fire properties. Or the other ways, which I think this group started off today, was saying, let's actually take however number of products, 6 or whatever, and really go through them into detail. I actually think going through this, however number it is, 6 products really into detail is really informative, because then you can take those and see, do they actually list up to the matrix? And can you actually get a simplified matrix out of it? I feel that we may never get a one matrix for everything. I think we may find that we end up with having to have separate lists for every individual product, and perhaps separate lists for every individual products in their particular usage case as well. So when you're using one product for whether it's a pump or a door in one location, whether you're using it and then whether you're using it in a different location as well. So, but yeah, so it's. And I suppose that sort of comes back to the approach of what we want to figure out with this group. What are we trying to do? Are we trying to do the high level or the low level? Or the really granular stuff.
Mm-hmm. Johnny, question to you or question to everybody. In terms of the workflow through, let's say, the REBA 1 process, if we went backwards, so Johnny, starting from a client point of view, the data you need, and let's work in reverse. I just table that as a shooting from the hip, as an idea of actually let's work from the user experience backwards into the construction rather than the conventional way.
I think that's a good idea.
So this is something I tried to get up and running in our company in L&Q, but it never sort of went ahead, unfortunately. I said to them, look, I need something that will allow me to store data like this. And the idea was I was going to give them a list of common attributes across all products, all systems and everything like that. And then I said, right, here's the product or system based on Uniclass, and here is the attribute for, in fact, this is just what did I call that one there? What the default value would be for their capacity or whatever it was as an attribute. And I said that, okay, you will have non-common attributes. So this is things like, I need to know the gas council number specifically for domestic gas boilers and things like that. I need to know the grade of system and category of system for fire equipment. And then I would have grade of system and category of system there, which is all what you were talking about, the BS standards.
Yep.
This never got finished because I never had the drive in L&Q to create this at the time. But this is essentially what I was working on and what you were talking about as a requirement.
Yeah.
Saying actually doing non-common attributes specifically linked to products or systems.
That's the gap, and I think I'll just chime in as from a client perspective and somebody who's worked on this from the asset management perspective, and as a development manager and to trying to instruct this, is that what asset management doesn't have right now is a clear understanding of what they need to get past the gateways. And asset management is in social housing at least is very much the thinking is paradigmed by what their current systems are.
Yeah,
so I think it's fair from my perspective and the organizations that I've worked in is that most asset managers don't know what they need. So this exercise is about raising the bar on both the production and the reception of fire safety asset information requirements. So Will, I mean, it's a totally sensible question. Ask people what they want. But asset managers don't know yet. They can't articulate it at this stage of the evolution of this issue.
Okay.
Lee, just picking up on what you said there, Lee. We can include you in what we're doing with the Housing Data Standards Group, because what you're asking for there is exactly what we're doing. Okay, so we can pick up separately.
Conscious we've gone over the over the hour and a half.
Sorry.
All right. I think we all know what the action is on myself, and with Scott's help, we'll put something together and circulate it with the information we need. Okay. Good. Thanks for your time, everyone.
Thanks, Will.
Cheers now. Bye.
Thank you, Will. Thanks, Scott. Thanks for organising it. Cheers.
Take care.
Cheers. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye now.